Hi there. We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We are Erin from Everlearning, Hayley from Taking a Kinder Path, and myself, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. We're gathering to have conversations about family life and home education, most specifically unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed education, or as I often refer to it, consent-based learning. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us.
Welcome back to the virtual kitchen table. It's Erin here today, and actually, it's just you and I having a conversation.
Hi, Erin.
Today.
Yeah. Hi.
Snow where you are?
Sorry?
Are you getting snow where you are?
We are. I mean, I actually have the blinds closed for some odd reason right now, but before we got on, it was coming down and the roads were actually getting messy here, which I didn't really look ahead, so I was a little bit surprised. But what about where you are?
Yep, we also are getting snow today, and it's kind of been one of those weeks where I just haven't taken much of a pause to even look at the weather. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It is snowy again. Yeah. So today we are talking about the value of online community, which was originally an idea that Hayley had. And we like to talk about community. I feel like we've talked about community a few times in a few different ways. But we have done we've done at least a couple of episodes, I think, about in-person community. So we will link those. I think Kendall from Spark to Flame Learning was part of 2 of those at least. But there's another kind of community-oriented one. I think we were talking about I can't think of it. I'm terrible. I really need to prepare better with episode names before I start, Ashley, and you're always so good at, I see you looking it up. But it was early on, and it was the idea of kind of learning, just being part of the life of a community.
I think it was one of our first few episodes.
Yeah, we'll find it, we'll link it. But anyway, we're back to talking about community, and I think at the time that Hayley mentioned it, we weren't sure whether would a conversation about community encompass all kinds of community, but really there was so much to talk about with in-person community that we never really got to it. Even we've alluded to it here and there. So yes, we're going to talk more about that today. And actually for the next couple episodes, probably I think we're going to focus on the idea of online community in different ways. We all know there are many much talked about drawbacks to the online world, but I think that for many people, and particularly in the world of home education, I think online connections have been key, I think, to people not only meeting other people, but just sharing ideas, understanding different ways of doing things, not feeling so alone. So I think we'll have lots to talk about these next couple of episodes. And one of the reasons that we kind of thought, well, this would be really good timing to revisit this topic, is that we have some exciting news that we are opening a community that is connected with our podcast, or basically our podcast name and the values and kind of general feeling of our podcast. So very soon there will be the virtual kitchen table community in addition to the virtual kitchen table podcast. So
woohoo!
Yeah, I was going to say Ashley's doing a behind the scenes.
Yeah. We're doing a celebratory dance. It's so exciting.
Exactly. So to give a little bit of background on that, some people might know there was currently I've been connected and involved in co-hosting an online private community called Unschooling Together. And that community evolved from a community that began 5 years ago. Sue Elvis had started a community that was connected to her website, Stories of an Unschooling Family. So that was an online group that it might have been my first online group, actually. I joined about 3 at the beginning of the pandemic. But I think I even joined this one a little bit before the pandemic started. So that, people kind of came together and shared a lot about unschooling, and it was a really great space and a really great time to do that with people, many people spending more time at home. So online communities were something I really enjoyed and continue to enjoy. And I'll talk a little bit about the other ones that I was part of in the episode, because I do continue to be part of 2 of those still. So yeah, Ashley, so I think we're going to, later on, we'll talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of this new community. A little bit of a spoiler alert, we are still going to be focusing a lot on unschooling in the community, but broadening that a little bit as well, so that we're also talking about thoughtful, conscious parenting, and maybe just generally kind of eclectic home education, not quite so niche down to unschooling. So hopefully we'll get time to explain what we mean by that a little bit later on. But all that to say, I think Ashley, you, Hayley, and I have all had a lot of benefit from various outlets of online community. So we're looking forward to talking about that, and also letting people know about some different online communities, because not every community is going to be a fit for every person. And if you're like me and you belong to a few, different groups speak to different aspects of your personality, or maybe stage of life, and where your kids are at, all those kinds of things. So yeah, let's dive into that. So, do you have anything to add before we dive in, Ashley? Or?
No, I'm just really excited. And I think this will be a really nice opportunity for people who are maybe interested or looking for something like an online community to get a little bit of a sense of what the virtual kitchen table community will look like. So I think we're good to dive in.
Okay. Well, maybe we can, I think we've covered this here and there, but why don't we just start with the obvious, that you, Hayley, and I met through the virtual world, right? And I think, if anybody doubts that online connections can be real and can be authentic, and that you can kind of find your people, I just have so many examples over the last few years where I just feel like I've met really wonderful people, and I've been able to connect in a way with people that if you had said to me like 10 years ago, would you be able to form real friendships or real connections with people? I mean, I probably wouldn't have argued with it, but I don't think I would have understood like the actual depth and authenticity that online connections can bring. So just thinking about how I met each of you. So Hayley, I met online, but I met her through, I think I read a comment of hers or a link of hers on Sue Elvis's website, on the Stories of an Unschooling Family website. And I read her comment, I linked to her website, and through reading her blog posts, first of all, she was in somewhat of a similar parenting stage as me, because we both had older kids, although she has a younger one, very similar to your oldest one's age, I think. Ashley.
Yeah.
He kind of has a foot in both of our worlds.
Yeah.
Which is fun. But yeah, I was reading her writing and I thought, oh, I just relate so much to this. So I think I must have commented on one of her articles, one of her blog posts, which then clued her into me. So I found her first, and she clued in that I was around, I think. And she commented on one of my blog posts, and I think we just kind of formed the idea that we really connected in our thinking and our way of parenting, and even just our way of seeing the world, I think. So yeah, so that was fun. And we did that for just a very few years, really. And then Ashley, you and I think connected over Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I think you had left a comment on my blog, potentially.
Yeah.
Maybe you had messaged me on Instagram, but I had seen you popping up on different people's accounts. And
okay.
what I think, I've never even shared this with you, what drew me to you, Ashley, was the fact that you were just, whenever I saw your name pop up, it was just, you were very encouraging. You were always promoting people. I just had a sense of like, you kind of we're entering this home ed world, and it's like you were so positive and wanted the best for people. So you wanted people's content to be seen. And if someone had an idea, it was like you would put it in your stories. And anytime that I saw comments from you, I don't know, I just felt this is just such a nice, encouraging way to be within the online community, because as we've alluded to in the past, even the people that you don't know really, really well, there is kind of this feeling of like there's like a global community, isn't there, of like conscious parenting and home education. And then if you want to bring it down a little more specifically, unschooling. And so we relate to people in different ways. But even if you're not in like a private community with somebody, or you haven't had a one-to-one interaction with them, just by interacting with people's posts, or not even their posts, maybe someone shares something in their stories and you just agree with it, or you do start to develop some level of authentic connection with people. So anyway, so that's kind of, I think, how we met, was Instagram, right? And then and then when I was thinking about the idea of podcasting, I just felt like, I don't think you and Ash, or had you and Hayley met yet?
No, I knew of her, but I don't think we connected in any way.
No, I think you knew of her blog. She was following you on Instagram, and it was a bit of a shot in the dark, right? Because none of us had, even Hayley, like we'd been following each other, but I hadn't had much verbal connection with her. A little bit, but not much. I think we'd been on a couple of group calls together. And so I asked her if she would be interested in doing a one-to-one Zoom, which we did. And I told her about my idea, and I mentioned you, and she said she knew of you. And then the first time we got together, I think we just gelled. But the only way we kind of knew we might gel was from watching each other's online interaction, right? So that's kind of remarkable.
It is. And I feel like that's so nice to hear. And it's like a little history of Virtual Kitchen Table.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking how courageous you were. Because like that shot in the dark, right? But you're right. Like I think there is something maybe even special or unique about online connections, is you do kind of get to know people in a way, or maybe not what they're all about, but a little bit about. You really get a sense with what they're putting out there, and you're either drawn to it or you're not. And I don't know that's talked about a lot, but thank you. And that's lovely to hear. And I agree with everything you said with, just connecting with other people, and how, it's just a little bit of back and forth, and you start to develop, a connection, and you don't know where that will lead. And there's no denying that in-person connections and in-person community is huge and valuable. And it's what I think we hope for anybody who's looking for something like that. Well, definitely for anyone who's looking for in-person connections and community. But I think online connections and online community are so important, especially for some people, especially for some vulnerable people. But, just sticking with home education and unschooling, or maybe even parenting, especially during the pandemic, when the whole in-person thing looked very different and just wasn't as much of a thing. And a lot of people starting, like myself, to home educate during that time. Those online connections and online communities, and for me, it wasn't online community like in the sense of a private community, but online connections were a game changer for me. Like that of course, and I've talked on here before. So I started with the books, I started with the podcasts, the blogs, but being able to connect. And for me, I think it's safe to say I looked for, if I listened to a podcast, then I would try to find that person on Instagram. And that's just where I was. That's the kind of social media platform, I guess, that worked best for me at the time. And I could just send a message if I wanted, or like you said, and I love that you shared that, because I do very much so love if I see something and it really resonates with me, or it really helps me, or I think it's a really positive message, I love sharing it. So I guess I was doing that years ago as well. So maybe I wouldn't even message the person that, if I read their book or I read their blog or listened to them on a podcast or whatever, I might not message them, but I would maybe share something of theirs. And yeah, I think it's again, in person is great, but you can have both, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You can have both. And that online stuff, it's also just in a lot of ways so accessible. I mean, you and I don't even live that far apart from one another. We have met in person, I think only twice, but that's still pretty good. But we connect online. Like we connect online, and Hayley obviously is in the UK, so we need to connect online with her. And yeah, like I said earlier, you never know where it will lead, and it doesn't have to lead anywhere. But I just see it as like a win-win for everyone involved. So anyway, I will stop rambling about all of that. But I'll just finish by saying that I'm really, really grateful for my connections, obviously, with you and Hayley, and that, that shot in the dark and asked me if I'd be interested in doing the podcast, which I was like, what? Me? Why? Yeah, sure. I think so. Okay. I mean, truthfully, I said yes because there were two reasons. But the main one, I mean, I loved sharing, and I thought I've gained so much from what other people have shared. So I'll share a bit too. But also, I was just like, yes, I want to have conversations with you and Hayley. How do I say no to that? So I'm just so grateful. And then I've had so many connections, some that I've stayed connected with online for years at this point, and others that have kind of come and go. And then the odd ones that were online connections that I've had the pleasure of connecting with in person too. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, the idea, because I was saying to somebody the other day, I don't remember how old I was, but I remember it was during the era of, like as a teenager, I spent enormous amounts of time on a telephone, as many people who grew up in like the 80s and 90s will be able to relate to.
Yeah.
Enormous amounts of time on the telephone with, just friends and situations and whatever. Yeah. And I can remember somebody saying to me at that time, at some point we'll kind of get to the technology level that you'll be seeing the person's face as you talk on the phone. And I was kind of like horrified at the time, because I was like, oh, I don't really want to be talking to somebody face to face. I was, hanging upside down with my right. But I do remember thinking like, that just feels that is incredible to think about, because even though, and I'm probably thinking it was probably like the early 90s that somebody said that to me. It wasn't like, we forget how new some of this technology is.
Yeah.
I have a memory of the first time that my kids FaceTimed my husband, and we were in Prince Edward Island, and he was home here in Ontario. And I remember them FaceTiming with their iPods, and I can't remember, they were pretty little. And to them, they've always grown up with this, right? So even though that was the first time they FaceTimed, they weren't super, super old. But this is just normal now, to be able to access people, both their voice and their image, or you can choose, you don't have to show your image or whatever. And I think that was the piece I was missing when I first felt horrified by that information about the phone. I was like, oh no, it's an option,
Yeah.
Right? It's not like all phones are coming with an automatic camera, So it's so funny how our thinking changes, but in my mind, that was what it would be. So now it's just like, oh my gosh, we have all these different options and platforms, and we can opt out. That's the other thing. It's not like, in some ways, I think the virtual world has made it harder to have privacy and opt out, but in other ways, it's made it easier. I mean, there's all kinds of, you don't have to answer your phone. People can get in touch with you. I mean, it's frustrating sometimes. If you want a break, people can get in touch with you in other ways. But at the same time, we have all these different ways of kind of modifying what works for us.
Yeah.
And so if you think about online connections, I mean, even talking about the idea of the private community, that works for a lot of people in a way that social media doesn't, or both work for them, but in different ways. But for other people, maybe they would much rather stay with social media and have it be a little bit broader based. So I do love the idea that we can tailor. I mean, I think we're a bit spoiled for choice at some, you know, sometimes I'll go to respond quickly to somebody and I'm like, which of the 5 ways
Yeah.
should I do this in, you know, like, am I messaging them on a platform? Am I emailing them? Am I texting them? So some ways we're kind of spoiled for choice, but really I do love the fact that we can kind of tailor what works for us. And something I just want to say too. So when my kids were younger, I'm impressed actually that people can manage social media and young kids. And I just, you know, I was on an online group to help plan events, and that was it. Like I didn't have sort of an online life at all when my kids were younger. And so when I started going online more as they got a little bit older, it was still not social media. It was still for me, it was blogs, it was podcasts, it was articles, you know, that I would read. But what I found, even if you're not in a one-to-one connection with that person. So for example, you know, I think I had said to you earlier, Ashley, like, you know, I could maybe read some of Peter Gray's research. And I mean, I don't know Peter Gray. I don't have you know, I'm not going to be chatting with Peter Gray later over text or anything like that. But, you know, you're invited to leave a comment on Psychology Today or wherever his article is. And even if I don't want to leave a comment, I can read other people's. And so what I started to realize, whether it was somebody who was writing more academically, like Dr. Peter Gray, or whether it was a parent sharing about their day-to-day interactions or whatever, because I think we need both. I think we need to hear the day-to-day stuff that people share as well. Even if I'm not directly connected, even if I don't comment on their blog or their podcast, there is something about knowing that there are other people in the world, and apparently a lot of them, as it turns out, because you don't always see that in your in-person life. So, you know, you read this stuff and you think, okay, there's other people who are thinking in these ways, and maybe we don't even share the exact same perspective about this, but they're opening the conversation. Or maybe their family is pretty different than mine, but I'm still getting something from knowing that there's, I don't know, it's kind of like there's this global community around thoughtful parenting, around home education. And it just feels good to know, even if you don't want to be part of it in that moment, you can be. You can comment, you can reach out to somebody, versus buying that same person's book or even borrowing it from the library. Like, you're there with their thoughts, and that definitely gives you a sense of not being alone for sure. But there's something about the accessibility of the online world that you can actually interact with other people involved with them. I don't know.
Yeah. It makes me think about how we think about community. And I think I don't know, but I think like the general definition of community, I'm even thinking back to like when we teach our children about what a community is, or at least how we would do it in a school-like way. That's the way I'm familiar with, is, you know, you talk about the people in your neighborhood, or maybe the people in your town or your city, like the people basically in your surroundings that you maybe live around or go to school with or go to work with, and that's your community. And I wouldn't disagree with that. I wouldn't argue that definition, but I think we can also think about community is more so about being with people who, you know, and I say being with people, they don't have to necessarily be within our neighborhood, right? So it's perfect for thinking about like online communities, but like being with people in connection, I guess, with people who, like what you're talking about, you kind of share some beliefs with. doesn't have to be that you're on the same page about everything, but there's like a commonality of maybe it's the, attachment parenting, or maybe it's unschooling, or whatever it may be, or even just around a special interest, right? People develop these communities around Pokemon, right? And it's a shared interest that brings those people together and those connections happen. And that can be a community. And to me, that's a more meaningful and valuable community, because you're not to say that there's not value in community as far as like your neighborhood, that's important. But when you can connect with someone and you feel like, I think it's a little bit of like, I know this person will get me. Like I can share these thoughts, not with everyone in my neighborhood, but I can go to this community, I can share this thought, and I know they'll understand what I'm saying. So like that sense of belonging, I guess. And I think about online communities a little bit more like that. I hope that made sense.
No, it made a lot of sense. And it has me thinking about a few different things. One being that you can choose how you want to be online. So for example, and people do this in different ways, I don't have any online presence. Well, people in my physical life are welcome to read my blog, or they're welcome to listen to this episode. But I don't purposely connect with people in my, it's so hard to even know the language. The term in real life, well, this is my real life also. Yeah. So if I look at my like calendar for today, like I have some in-person stuff I'm doing later, but this is just as important to me as the person I'm going to be. Right. So sorry, that's just a bit of I struggle a little bit with the term in real life, because like, this is a huge part of our life. But I think my point is, I kind of consciously chose not to, like my time online is not personal, it's not physical people connections, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like, so I have like, even for example, my newsletter, or I think my newsletter, there's maybe like 5 people who I know where they live, and they know where I live, and we could easily, and when I say know where I live, I mean like I could drop by their house. Like that kind of,
could run into them at the grocery store.
Yes, exactly. And like with Instagram, I think there's like 2, maybe 3 people that I know in real life, like people that I knew before I was on Instagram. So I very specifically wanted to build community around this particular topic of, family life and home education. And it's not that if there are people local, it's not like they're not welcome to follow, but I didn't, my point was not to connect with my neighbor on social media, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I very much appreciate my neighbors. Yeah. I don't need to connect with them necessarily over social media. So I think what it does too, Ashley, is it gives a little bit of, that feeling where, I'm going to use a wedding as an example. You have a wedding and you suddenly realize you have people invited from like 6 different parts of your life, right? So you're trying to put into a room a whole bunch of different aspects of who you are. And there's just, when you're connecting with somebody online, there's just no conflict of interest in that same way. So I would say that's a little bit less so for social media. If you have a public account, because you're putting stuff out there, you're not sure who will read it or how it will be interpreted. But the benefit of something like a private community, I can say that I, am feeling a certain way about my neighborhood, or that I'm struggling with whoever, a coworker, whatever, and I have the space to say that. I would still be careful, I'm not going to say which neighbor, or I'm not going to give names or whatever, but sometimes we need an opportunity to talk about those things. And that's really hard to do when you're connected to somebody else who's connected to somebody else who's whatever. So there's a level of objectivity, I think, that can have. So I can come to you with something, Ashley, that I couldn't come to with like my high school best friend, because my high school best friend knows the other person that I'm struggling with And there's potentially some danger in that as well, as far as we could present ourselves in a certain way. Like there's a level of, we talk about how sometimes people's online personas aren't 100% realistic.
Right.
Right. But so there are cons.
Of course.
Right. But there's just that benefit to be able to connect over things and not have that. There's a degree of separation that's there.
Yeah. And it's also making me think of a degree of safety, which I think that when I think about community, like I want to feel safe within my community. And I think maybe it's a space where we can be a little bit more vulnerable, where obviously we're not going to be vulnerable in all situations. Whether it's online, like you're saying, kind of more like social media type stuff. We think a little bit more about what we share, as we should. That makes sense to do that, even just to keep ourselves safe. But a private community, I think, offers a little bit more safety, where we can bring, not to say we're not still mindful and thoughtful about what we share, what we say, but it's just I think a safer space.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. The other thing that came up for me in what you had said prior was the idea that of how connected, as much as we're saying there's this distinction, in another interesting way, there's a connection between, I'm going to call it like in-person life instead of real life, like in-person life and like online life, in the sense that the two really influence, like one influences the other. So for example, if you think about what people are bringing either to a private group as far as ideas or what they might be posting on a blog or social media, it's the online world can't exist without real life, because you're seeing people's physical environments, their connection with their family, the great book they saw at the library, that, you know what I mean? Like when you're sharing virtually, but you need to have some things going on physically in your life to be able to share those things. So it's kind of an interesting irony in a way, that you're logging in online and you're hearing about people's lives, but you're seeing very physical things. You're literally seeing what's happening with, I mean, think about all the weather posts.
Yeah.
Right? Like when a place gets a lot of snow, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing people's snow day posts, or it's summer weather, summertime or whatever. It's very physical, to the point that it's often nature, right? You're seeing very, very physical content, and that's what we're sharing. And then the flip of that is the connections that we make around things, we gain from those, and we bring those perspectives back into our physical lives. So, my family might think that these podcast recordings, like I'm away in some room talking about stuff, or, they know that I'm part of private communities and I'm learning from people, and it might seem like a separate thing, but it's like so many of the ideas and the conversations are directly affecting the way I go about being in relationship with them, the choices I make in my lifestyle, in my job, with extended family. Like I'm taking stuff away.
Mm-hmm.
And right, like, so it's an interesting interplay between the two. Like it's
making me think about and this might be the blog post I read of yours, not the first one I read, but the one I maybe first commented on, or the one that sticks out to me, because at the time I was reading about this idea around kids and chores. And I mean, there's so many examples, so I'll just use that one. But I would have read your blog post, and having read that, I would have walked away from my computer and I would have responded or reacted or behaved differently around chores and my family. And because my ideas would have shifted in a way, in that case, in a good way that felt good. And I read something that was like, okay, this makes sense. I'm grateful that I've read this. And I mean, the same thing happens when I can listen to a podcast. And that's why when we do have conversations like this, or have conversations, when we're writing to each other back and forth in a community or on a Zoom chat, in a sense, to me, it's like work, right? Like we're working on ourselves. I mean, not all the time. Sometimes it's just for enjoyment or pleasure or entertainment or friendship, and that's all fine too. But a lot of the times we really do read something or intake something or listen to something, and it changes us a little bit. And then we go into our real life, back to our in-person people, our physical world, I guess. Like to me, it's just no different than picking up a book, reading it, and feeling like it's changed you a bit. And the person you were before you read the book is a little bit different now. And I think the virtual stuff I think anyway, if I understood what you were saying, that's kind of what it made me think, how it does definitely impacts me as a parent. When I listen to someone talk about, the relationship they have with their kids and the level of respect and all of that stuff, that's work I'm doing by listening to that. And then I, at least from my perspective, feel like I go back and I can be the type of parent that I want to be. But I needed that. Like I needed to hear that, or I needed to have that conversation with someone else to get there. And to me, that's what, being in community is about, I guess, or at least a big part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that you can have small group conversations that can go much deeper than you could with a small group of now I'm going to say a small group of in-person people. You can be with a small group of in-person people that you have known a really long time, and you are maybe getting into really deep conversation. I don't mean that never happens, but considering the amount of time that you know somebody online, like you can meet somebody, get a bit of a sense of them, and you can both find yourselves part of a really interesting, rich conversation that kind of challenges you, that makes you think in different ways. And the risk is so much less because you go back to sometimes you're not even living in the same country, right?
Yeah.
But you can exchange these ideas, and then that can be what it is. You can literally just meet for the purpose of having a conversation about something you're interested in, and you can leave it there. So I think the depth of conversation that I'm able to have on some of these online forums is just, it really reminds me of like getting together, usually with, like I have that depth of conversation usually with just like one other person, right? Like my sister and I might get together and dig into something, or a longtime friend and I might get together and do that, or a coworker and I might block off an afternoon and just really dig into stuff.
Yeah.
But the odds of like a few people getting together and no one has known each other the same length of time and really feeling safe enough to dive into something is pretty rare. For me, I'm like speaking for myself, but
yeah, same here for sure. Especially I think because the odd time where that happens a little bit, you walk away being like, oh, that was really special.
yeah.
But I think more often I walk away from maybe even just a time where I felt like I shared a little bit too much, and then I walk away and I go, oh. But if I knew I was never going to see that person again, I'd probably be like, well, whatever. Feel a little bit better about it. Yeah, there's something about the safety of, I guess, being able to disconnect, and you're able to have those like deep, helpful, meaningful conversations more often, which I think is really beneficial.
Absolutely. I'm laughing actually, because when you said that, I was like, oh, you do better than I do, because you said, that was really special. And I'm thinking, I often leave those conversations thinking, oh.
Oh, no. Let me be clear. More often than not, you know what? As I get older, I've gotten a lot better at, I'm just like, say less, Ashley, say less. You'll feel better when you walk away. But I think that actually does speak to at least my own need and desire to have those meaningful conversations and to have those meaningful connections. I want those safe spaces and relationships to do that, because I get a lot out of it. So I think too often I've gone into, something a little bit too deep or too personal, or, I mean, whatever, it is what it is. But I 100% have walked away from many moments or conversations or little chats being like, oh my goodness, like why? But there have been times, but I it's rare, but it has happened where I'm just like, oh, and usually, you know, when I walk away and I feel like, well, that was special, then my next thought is, I hope I get to see that person again. I hope we have another opportunity like that. But that doesn't happen in person often. Um, but it does, I find, a lot more often virtually.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder too if there's sort of a, I don't know, do you find there's almost, and it's largely unspoken, but there's almost a bit of a code of respect and confidentiality on online interactions that doesn't always exist in person. And maybe that's because we're typically connecting with people about a shared interest rather than like we're not integrated into each other's lives, like our kids aren't playing on the same hockey team or whatever, you know. So maybe it's different because it's almost like therapeutic in a way, like you realize you're connecting to talk about this. And so there's almost it's weird because it has the potential to not be very safe. Right? I think sharing online has the potential to not be safe for a few reasons. I mean, we have no control over what somebody might post about a conversation, or, you know, just don't find that happens. I mean, I know it. I know. Listen, there's all kinds of problems on the internet. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying for the purposes that we're talking about, when we're connecting about a special interest, in our case, it tends to be like homeschooling and family life.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like there's a lot that can happen. There's a lot that people seem to understand without having to get too rule oriented. And I think, you know, sometimes it can be helpful to be part of online communities where, you know, there's some guidelines in the beginning around you know, just not getting too preachy with people, sharing your experience and not whatever. Like there's certainly pieces like that, but it's not like you're signing up for a group and signing a confidentiality contract or something like that. And I would say the same for social media. Like sometimes I see stuff that I feel like, that maybe went a little bit further than I would go as far as sharing somebody's stuff. But for the most part, I feel like there's some degree of, like I was thinking about this the other day. I was private messaging with somebody, excuse me, in the UK. And I'm saying I've gotten to know them. I've just gotten to know them because we've appreciated each other's posts or, you know, whatever. And so we don't really know each other that well, but we maybe connected about something. And that stream of messages, you get to know more about the person and a little bit more and a little bit more. And there's no sense that person, they could share what you've said. They could literally screenshot your private message. I mean, not to get,
but it happens
and take a pessimistic turn, but they could. But you develop some degree of trust with people. I mean, I'm not my bank account number out there, but I'm now in a level of conversation with somebody that I didn't even expect to be. Like we both talked about fall is our favorite season or something, and suddenly we're chatting about other stuff. And do you know what I mean? There's some kind of code. You kind of get to know that because the online world there's a lot of uncertainty. You almost, for many people, it brings out the worst. I'm not going to deny that's true, but I would say for many of us, it brings out a really good side of us. I think we hold confidentiality and privacy well.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. And I don't know exactly why it's like that. I mean, I have some thoughts that are popping up as you're talking about this. I think, at least when I'm thinking about specifically private online communities, I think a big piece of it is probably that we're all kind of showing up. Like I'm just thinking, what type of person is going to bother joining a private community and cause trouble. Not to say that, I mean, and sometimes trouble is caused and it's not intentional too, of course. So I'm not saying that things can't happen or that don't happen, but I think most people are, they themselves are showing up in a private community, I guess, looking for a safe space to connect with others, looking to make positive connections. And I think we're, you know, most people are good people and understand that when someone is sharing something personal, we just know that they wouldn't want that shared publicly by someone else. Like we just kind of know that. So, I mean, I'm sure there's sad situations and disappointing situations, but for the most part, I think everybody's kind of showing up with a similar goal of connecting with other people and having a safe space to connect on, you know, home education or whatever it may be. And maybe it's a bit of the whole like I'll treat people the way I want them to treat me. And yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, I do. So I think that with the private communities, and then I'm thinking a little bit more about Instagram. I won't even get into Facebook. I feel like Facebook groups can be another, that's where I've not seen a lot of awful stuff. Some of the not so great stuff that I have seen when it comes to online groups would probably be Facebook groups. But I mean, they've been around for a long time and stuff. So there's just so many different ones and stuff. Like to me, that's quite different than a private online community. And so my experience is a lot of connections is through Instagram, and totally, right? Like I could send a message, I'm writing it out, and that other person could screenshot it and post it on their Instagram or wherever else they want. It doesn't happen. I mean, again, maybe that has happened to someone and that's terrible, but again, I guess it depends on who you're connecting with and like the reasons why you're connecting and what you're talking about. Like, why would anyone that I've messaged ever, like, there's not even a benefit to them, I guess, right? So I think there is, thankfully, like it could be unsafe and we should be mindful, but for the most part, I've just seen such like positive, beautiful connections and relationships and support actually, that thankfully anyway, that online community has been able to offer from what I've seen. Now I'm a little bit worried that someone's going to listen to this and be and think of like some horrible experience that they've had that I'm just completely dismissing. But I can only speak from my experience, I guess.
Well, I think we're also, I mean, I'm sure we've all had negative experiences with online connections, and I'm sure we've all witnessed other people have negative experiences. So I don't think that the point, yeah, like I hear what you're saying. I was just thinking the same thing. Because when you brought up the Facebook groups, I'm like, oh yeah, I hear a lot of, so
yeah.
But to me, it's like, what is the potential? So I think the online world, I think too, has given us each probably both an opportunity and a responsibility to figure out what's healthy for us. What are we looking for? What's healthy, you know, who are we connected with that we see are healthy for other people? Like, I think there's a certain amount of discernment that we kind of have to play with sometimes. I mean, you hear people say this, it's like kind of curating what makes sense for what you're interested in and what your current mental state can manage, who you want to connect with. I mean, it does give us a lot of opportunity, but there is some responsibility there, not just for our own behavior, but who, you know, there's always going to be people behaving badly.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Right. And so I think so I agree that this is not all unicorns and whatever, but it's like, what is the potential?
Yeah.
For us, if we're looking to learn, I mean, it's kind of two sides of the coin. We're looking to learn, and then also looking to share, because then that's how other people learn. And so I think if we're moving forward in that space, that we just really want to do that positively, but everyone's line is going to be different, you know, because I think too, we are, you and I, and a lot of the topics that we talk about, it's sometimes somewhat of an unconventional way of doing things. And so there's going to be different controversy, or even within the group, there's going to be different ways of looking at things. And I think we each have to decide in a given season of our life, how much of that debate do we feel like being part of in the moment? And sometimes we might really want to dig into that. Like, I can even say that for myself. Sometimes I get really interested in some of the different, debate is not quite the right word, but spirited digging in, within our own community, like not the online private community, but I mean the homeschool community in general. And then other times I'm like, you know what, my brain is pretty full from other stuff in my life, and I would love to see like what book somebody's recommending right now. That's what I could handle right now. And I mean, part of the challenge with social media and algorithms and everything else is that sometimes they kind of make that decision for us on a day that we are not in the mood for whatever. But then we have to make choices about our use of the online world, and if we need a break, and if we, so it's not easy at all.
No, it's not easy, but I think I hadn't thought about that today, and you're right. And I have thought about that a lot for myself and my own, we do the same thing in our physical world, in our in-person connections, right? Like we're mindful of who we try to be mindful of who we spend time with and who we surround ourselves with. How do we leave when we, you have a date with a friend or a new friend, and you leave and you feel good. So you make another date to see that friend again, or, you've met up with this person or this group for a few times, and you find you're leaving not feeling good about yourself. You probably will stop seeing those people. So I think it's the same thing. Like there is definitely like a personal responsibility to think critically about that. And there's a lot of talk about like screen use, even like for adults, right? Like how many hours or how much time do you spend on your phone or in front of a computer, and what's healthy and what feels good. Like I feel like there's a lot more talk about that these days. We've talked about that stuff, which is important, but I think it is also thinking about, I talk about it with the kids, like what are you taking in? Like when you're not being active online, because there's the passive of just taking it all in, consuming videos, reading, whatever. But then there's, maybe you're commenting, maybe you're putting videos out or recording a podcast, like we're being active online right now. But when you are spending time taking stuff in, it's what we talked about earlier. It changes us a little bit, right? Like we leave either feeling good and motivated and inspired, or maybe neutral, or we leave feeling a way we don't want to feel. And I mean, maybe that's not exactly what you were talking about, but that's where my mind went, right? And I think that's important. So, and even within a community, you don't have to continue connecting with someone who you're not aligning with or not feeling great with or just not connecting with. Like, I think that's the nice thing about community too, is that there's usually like quite a few people. So you connect with who you want to connect with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And I'm thinking too, Ashley, that we make those decisions, excuse me, we talk to our kids about those kinds of things. And so how great for them to see us doing that ourselves and making those decisions for ourselves. And I think that there's a lot of conversation that can come from that, because, even as you're saying, we might come out of a conversation with somebody and not feel great. And that can happen, excuse me, that can happen in person, or it could be content that we're taking in of somebody else's online. And then I think there's another layer to that, like for me, I can also get curious about why that is. So, if I'm meeting with somebody, and I'm just going to use an in-person example just to start with, and they are talking about something in their life, and I leave and I feel not great. Well, maybe it's because, maybe on a moral or principled level, I don't feel great about the conversation. So that's one piece. Maybe it's just not something that's a fit for me right now in the state that I'm in emotionally or mentally or whatever. But there's also space to get curious about what it is that is a little bit triggering to you, right? So I know a lot of people with social media will talk about the way that people present, the perfect homes and nothing's messy and all those sorts of things. And so, those are times where you can go, have I truly seen too much of this, and the authenticity factor is not sitting well with me, or am I feeling not great about the state of our things right now, or what I have versus what they have, or how I look versus how they look, or whatever. There are all those pieces that come into play, and you might still choose not to continue online with those things, or they might not be places that you choose to build community. But I think there's something to that, isn't there, to be able to just critically reflect about that. Not that we always need to be doing that. Sometimes we're having a bad day and it's like, you know what?
I don't need this right now.
Not for me right
Not today.
And there's totally a place for that. But I just kind of find this idea of like sifting through it and just kind of holding it in a place of curiosity helpful, rather than just writing off, you know what, these people are fake, so I'm not going to be in community with it. Like, can I dig a little bit more into that for myself? Because I've often found that I've done these little challenges for myself sometimes, where I've maybe connected with somebody online or followed somebody on social media, and I can feel there's something that niggles a little bit, and I'm like, you know what, I really believe that we can often find a connecting point with most people. So there's also something about this that I'm not disconnecting from them either. So what is that about? Right? So just kind of holding that with curiosity and not trying to manipulate it, but just, and over time, I find that often even through just, I don't know, it could be really low key conversation, and maybe I don't even interact with them much at all. But over time, something will often surface that I'm like, oh, I really value this about that person. So I think not being too quick, because that's the other thing about online connections. In person, we have to put up with more from people.
Yes.
Right? Like I put up with certain sides of my neighbors, as well as the fact that they help me shovel the snow if I'm late getting home. Like, we have to kind of take the good and the bad. And I think we can, I kind of contradicting myself, because we just talked about being selective. We just talked about
balance.
Selective and the balance, but I think we need to keep that in mind too. Like, if I was living across the street from this person, could I see value in them? And usually the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I think that's really an important part of community, because I don't want to, like, I'll just speak for myself, whether it's in person or online, I want to be very careful to not surround myself with everyone who just makes me feel good all the time, whether they're intentionally making me feel good by being kind or praising or whatnot, or just, it's a joyful interaction every time. There's not a lot of challenge in there. And there's not, if we're not being challenged, we're not learning, we're not growing. Right. So, and I think that is an important piece of community. So I'm really glad that you talked about that. And I think there's definitely opportunities for that, because even in a community that is built around common ground or special interests like home education, we're still all different people. Especially like online, we are getting into people from wherever in the world, which is something that I have started to think about more and more, because sometimes we make assumptions about the person we're talking to just based on our own experience in the own place that we live in, and they might have a very different situation that we just can't even imagine because we've never even been to that part of the world. So I think that it is, well, I don't want to ramble too much here, but I am glad that you went into that, because I think that, especially I think online, although I guess, well, it's what you pointed out, but it's easier to do online, to find yourself almost in this bubble that feels very safe, very good. And that could be wonderful. And maybe at times, maybe there are times in people's lives where they need that. So I'm not saying that that's completely wrong to have, but I think for the most part, overall, you want to find community, that there are people in there who have different thoughts and beliefs, and they challenge you with those, and that will give you opportunity to grow and learn from that. So I'm glad you went into that, Erin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, because you're right. There are the two. You had mentioned the blog post about like chores and family responsibility, and we do need the people that we do need the cheerleaders and the people that are going to make us feel good, and we don't want to be challenged all the time, right? Like we can't. So I remember writing that post and putting it on up on the blog, and I feel that particular post really deeply, but it's very hard to describe the way that our family goes about responsibilities and chores. And I was really aware that it's quite counter to what most people think. It's certainly counter to a lot of conventional parenting advice, and it's definitely not going to work for certain personalities.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the other thing, is that if I'm writing something, I'm just offering, like, this is a possibility. These are the factors that I think have made this particular part of our life work pretty well. And so I'd like to share that. But something like that, something like chores, I feel like you kind of open yourself up to a lot of, like, what? Her kids are going to turn out like this, or this might be fine for you, but this isn't going to work for this group of people, or whatever. And of course, you can't ever be writing for the whole world. You're writing for the people that could potentially resonate with what you're putting. But all that to say, Ashley, that having you be that voice that comes in and says, oh, I appreciated this, thank you for sharing this. We do need those people too.
Right.
That is kind of how we started this conversation around you, Ashley, and I connecting. And I mean, Hayley and I, connecting. And I mean, Hayley and I connected through Sue Elvis. So we do connect with people that we have this similar viewpoint. And it is really nice to have those people cheerlead us sometimes, right? It's finding that balance that we need those safer spaces in community too, where you know that person is pretty much always going to have your back and not, I don't know, challenge you too much, or not challenge you publicly too much, in a way that would be difficult.
Yeah, because if you're challenged too much, for me, if I'm challenged too much, I'm not going to feel safe enough to be vulnerable, which is what I need community for. So it's not to say I don't need and I can be challenged within a community, and actually I can probably benefit best from being challenged by someone who I'm in community with, who I typically do feel safe with, because they do cheer me on, and because I know that kind of like at the core we have very similar beliefs, and our values align a lot. So I can be safe with them. And if they challenge me, my ears are wide open, and I'm going to probably spend more time thinking about, and working through that challenge. But yeah, I think, when we're talking about not just like online in general, but, online or in like online community, you want both, right? You want that safe space, which I think that's why we build these communities around these shared values and ideas or philosophies. But we want the community to be big enough so that there are, there's diversity within that too. So yeah,
it's like any part of our life. We have different people that as it should be, we connect with about different things, because one person can't be everything to us.
Yes.
So it's nice to be able to kind of have that, I guess, broaden that base, maybe are the words coming to my mind around that. But agreed. Yeah. And isn't that so much just around what you just said there, what we talk a lot about as far as our interactions with our kids too, that we are in a much better position to come forward to them with something if we have a genuine concern, or we really do need to give them some feedback about something, if there's like a culture of like safety and respect within a relationship with them. So if we are not always the person saying, why did you do this, or you should be doing this, or if our overarching relationship with them is one of trust and respect, then when we do feel like there's something that, this would be really good to connect about and give some feedback about, it doesn't feel, I mean, it might still not be comfortable, but it feels like there's a space for them to listen, and, different kids, different people will take in feedback in different ways. I get that. You know, I'm not always the best at feedback, especially from my family. I can tend to be defensive. But because of the relationship that we have, I can get over that pretty. I might not say in that moment, okay, I'll think about that, but you know, I'm thinking about it and I'm respecting their opinion on it. But that comes from that really strong foundational relationship.
Yeah, yeah. 100%. And I think yeah, that's such a good way of putting it, is thinking about our relationship with our kids. And I don't, like you said, everybody's different, but I think this is true. I mean, at least I think it's good to think this way anyway, even if I'm wrong. I think for myself and a lot of people, maybe most people, like you need a lot of, I don't even know what words to use, but like it's a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of time, I think, in a lot of cases to build that trust. You know, like so if someone's having a difficult time, like a difficult relationship with their children, but they're at a point where they're really wanting to help them, and so they've gotten that message, like I have to improve the relationship first. That's a lot of work. It's gonna take a lot of time, right? Like for me, someone's gonna have to put a lot of time and energy into me. I mean, not on surface level stuff, right? But like on the real deep stuff. Like if someone's got something really critical to say, like you better have like convinced me that like I need to know that you already see me as a good person. And then I can hear that criticism and it will be helpful. And I think of our kids, and as a parent, I mean, we all know that we want our parents to think the world of us. We cannot have our parents not thinking we're good people. So we need to, that takes time, and that respectful relationship builds over time. And then, yeah, like you said, it can still be uncomfortable, but they're just more in a place where they feel safe enough to hear the criticism, I guess. I mean, this could be, we have another future episode coming up on this topic.
We do.
I mean, we've talked so much. No, I'm just, I don't actually think we have one planned. Maybe we do, but I'm just saying,
Nope.
this could be another whole topic. And I mean, we talk about this stuff a lot on this podcast. But I think, I mean, when we're talking about community, our family is like our first community. And that changes often as we get older and throughout our lifespan. But like our family is where we learn about what relationships are and then what community is. And I think a lot of what happens and what's true within like our familial community is true for any other community we have with other people. Although I want to highlight what you said about like we show up different in different spaces. And I think that I didn't know that growing up. I don't feel like I was directly taught or picked that up. I always thought I had to just show up as yourself, show up as yourself. That's the message I always heard. Just be yourself and you'll be accepted, which is a lovely message. But I needed someone to directly tell me it is okay to show up not as a different person, but think about how safe you are in each space and community, and you're not always going to feel the safest in every community, and that's just normal. But if you're in a meaningful community, you obviously still have to have a degree of safety, and that happens within the relationships and connections, and even just the first few interactions you have with somebody in a community. Like that's the start of it. I'm rambling, so I will stop. I love this.
No, I love that, because that idea of show up as yourself, because I think here's the other thing I think that does, if we're talking about community, it puts a lot of pressure on other people to have to fully align and accept with every part of every person that comes into community. I mean, I even think about it in friendships, or, I mean, people have different views on this in marriages. Some people feel that, you know, a life partner is everything, but a lot of people find that marriages and partnerships go better if you're not, you know, if you get some of those other parts of yourself met in different ways. So, you know, I don't think it's a matter of being inauthentic. I think being honest. I mean, my husband knows that there are parts of me, if I'm going like hiking with somebody or birding with somebody, that is a part of me that he definitely knows about it. I mean, he bought me a new bird feeder. It's not like I'm not trying to hide it from him, but he does not expect me to be nerding out about wildlife and nature information to him. And it's kind of like he knows there's a part of me he's not as familiar with. He'll send me links to stuff. He appreciates that he can't be everything to me, right? And that's like one example. But you know, if I'm getting together with my sister and we are like kind of diving into some stuff, like we share a lifetime of past history, we share a genealogy that our husbands don't share with us.
Yeah.
And there's obviously pieces of our own adult family life with our husbands and our children, excuse me, that we share only with our created family and not with one another. So I think it's just healthy to be able to recognize that we don't need every part of every other person, and nor do we need to take care of or be fascinated by every part of every other person. Like that's just too much to hold. Like,
it's too much. Right? And it's making me think it's true with our kids too. It's another way it's true with our kids. And the older they get, I mean, obviously the parents stay as an important role, but we start as they get older thinking, who else can I help them bring into their life, that because I can't be everything, I can't be everyone to them. You know, the older that they get, I will still play an important role, but I'm just not maybe interested in this as much as they are. And I really want to connect them with someone else who's passionate about this, or a skill that they could benefit from learning or are interested in learning in that I don't really have. So I can find someone. So and then just thinking about, again, a home education online community. Of course, I talk with my husband a lot about home education because he's part of the family and he's part of the family that home educates. We have to have these conversations and whatnot together. I'm obviously a lot more passionate about it and interested in it. So instead of always going to him to talk about this stuff, I can have an online community or a podcast to talk about it. So I think that's such a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you're talking about how we bring different people into our kids' lives, and they might be physical people, they might be ideas, they might be YouTubers, right? Like all different, we can access that in person, we can access it online. But we do that, I think, when you have positive online community, whether that is social media, whether that's even the situation that I found myself in with Hayley and Sue, where I'm like, oh, this person might like this person's stuff. Because Hayley does that a lot, I find, in her blog posts. She will link to really like a wide variety of really good podcasts and resources. And so you're also helping other people. You know, she writes a blog post. She's not saying, okay, here are my ideas. This is all you need to know about this. She's saying, here are 8 other people who you find connection with. And so I think a healthy online community, you're giving the part of yourself that might be relevant to that person, but you're also on the lookout for, you know, who might I connect or who might I refer them to? And even on a bit of a more personalized level, like I can think, Ashley, of situations within the current, like the Unschooling Together community, where I've had people say, they might email me or private message me in the group and say, I would love to talk about this, you know, and it might not feel like a whole group Zoom meeting call.
Right.
And I think what they're saying is, I'd like to talk about it with you. And sometimes a one-to-one conversation is great, but I mean, I've pulled you into a couple of conversations too, where I've been like, I'm happy to talk to you about this. And I know of somebody else who I think might be able to add to this conversation, or you might even have some commonality that I can't bring in this particular instance. So I think that's part of it, isn't it? It's not being attached to, I don't know, it's just like spreading the love. And the knowledge, spreading the knowledge, right? And the experience.
There's just so much out there, right? Like there's so many people doing so many awesome things, sharing so many really great ideas. So when, you think that someone else could benefit from learning about that, you just want to connect them or share in some way, because there really is and it's great that there's so much out there, but it's easy to miss stuff. Like something that still irks me, which is, it's so ridiculous, but on Instagram, and it's not surprising, but I mean, I've just been on Instagram for so long and I've made so many connections and I've seen so many different things, but because there's so many Instagram accounts out there, of course, like everyone, I'm coming up all of a sudden, an account will, show up, or I'll see it on someone else's story, or you'll send it to me, or like you sent one to me recently, actually. But I'll come across like this really cool account with this really cool person doing this really cool stuff. And I'm like, how did I not know about this person? And then I think there's other ones out there that I don't know about. And I mean, this doesn't actually drive me that crazy, but I just find it so interesting, that you can be in a space and you can be learning about something for so long and still have not come across all the amazing whatever resources, people, ideas that are out there. So I think you and I, obviously, we feel the same about making those connections and sharing those things. But yeah, and then also there's the piece where, I mean, that's great because that's helpful for the people that we share it with. But it's just also nice because when someone does create something really cool, I want it to be known. I want it to be out there, right? Like and I think part of it is I want them to feel appreciated for putting that out into the world. So that's a piece of it as well, which and it's just nice when you can do that within community. We can do it outside of community too and just share it in general, but it's nice when it can be a little bit more I don't know, specific or personal, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I have those moments too. I think, how did I not know about this person? Or you'll see that almost everybody else that you're connected with.
Yes. Yes. And I'm like, I'm left out.
Yeah.
I don't actually think that.
There's a little bit of that sometimes. It's like, what?
How did I miss this?
Yeah, no, it's so true. So we were kind of excited because we thought we might make a shorter episode today.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be talking about this again pretty soon. So in kind of I guess maybe a separate episode, but a continuation of the conversation, right? So in that spirit, I do think we wanted to just take it looks like it'll just be a few minutes now to talk about the virtual kitchen table community. And I think before we even do that, would this be a good time? We had talked about how all communities are not for all people, or they might be, but people might also want something else for, like, as we've been talking about, another aspect of themselves, right? So I think we're going to try to link some to this episode that we can think of, but just kind of in the spirit of, like, we're excited to open up Virtual Kitchen Table at a community level, and also we're excited to see what other people are creating and coming up with. So I think maybe we can just talk a little bit about what the community is, maybe a few things that it isn't, and then if people are looking for those things, we'll try to think of some off the top of our head to add, but also people could always connect with us see if we might know of something, right? That might be a better fit. Am I getting that?
Yeah, for sure. Because obviously we want to keep the community open, but I think you've said it, that people are looking for certain things at different points in just wherever they are. And we know about other communities. And we were just talking about how we like sharing resources and helping people find, I guess, what they're looking for or what we think might benefit them. So we can always share about that as well. But obviously we want to talk a little bit about, I guess, what people can expect from the virtual kitchen table community, to a degree anyway. And then they can reach out and connect with us if they have any specific questions too, of course.
Exactly. So I think if you've been listening to the podcast, like if you're a listener who's been listening to our podcast, what you can expect in the community is probably relatively similar to what you get here. And I don't think we explicitly state this a lot, Ashley, but we certainly talk about this with Hayley, and we talk about this with, in brief ways, at least, with anybody who's come on and been part of the discussions we've had, is that our sort of way of being on the podcast, I mean, I'm gonna say it's like our goal, but really it's the only way we can be, I think, given who the three of us are. I could be wrong. Is just the idea that we're pretty unscripted. First of all, you might have noticed that. we don't have like an interview format, or we're kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
But essentially, I think for us, I mean, I'll just speak to the podcast first of all, I guess, and that's really a carryover into the community. Our purpose with the podcast is not to come forward with answers, I wouldn't say, right? We kind of look at ideas and common experiences, and we deepen those, and we share from our own perspectives. And sometimes that's actually our own family or maybe our own childhood. But often it's other things that we notice kind of happening culturally or societally or whatever. But really, it's an opportunity to ponder, isn't it? Like, we're sort of sifting through ideas and we're pondering. And I just think of this period of time, which is now over an hour, that we've been talking today, Ashley, and like, just even this conversation, I have other things now that I'm thinking about. And I think that we feel that's the value of having conversation, but not that we have no plan in, like, we usually have a topic and some general things we'd like to make sure that we fit in. But really, we just kind of, within those pretty loose guidelines, we just start talking.
Yeah.
And I find that we really learn from pondering. And so within the community, if you've been part of the Unschooling Together community, there are a number of people coming over with, like, several people coming over with us into this new community. There's some structure to it. You know, there's something to ponder this week post at the beginning of each week, which is just as we've kind of said, like, we put forward some thoughts and we just ponder them and we sift through them, and there's not a right or a wrong. It's really an opportunity to share ideas. There are lots of resources. So, you know, Spotlight Book of the Week and just different resources that we might appreciate either as parents. So that could be podcasts, articles, blogs, that kind of thing. Or resources that we think our kids or our family might really enjoy. So there's lots of resource sharing. And then we have some wrap up stuff at the end of the week where there's an opportunity to reflect on your week. And then for things that are a little bit more concrete, there's like a stirring post where we can talk about, like, what did we invite our kids to do? And we've expanded that in the current community, haven't we, Ashley, to talk about, like, what have other people strewn for us, or strewed? I never know how to say that, but
I know.
what have other people introduced us to or offered or invited, so that we're kind of, I loved the episode that we had with Kendall around strewing here, like the podcast episode, because it just opened up the concept of, I want to acknowledge we probably veered away from the original definition of strewing, but we broaden it, right, to talk about, like, what are we offering each other, what are we inviting. So I guess I just want to say that the spirit of conversation is very much pondering, sharing, encouraging. And from that perspective, just to be upfront, it's not a coaching community. So if people are, so you would have people at very, very different, varying ends of the age. Some people are just getting started. Some people have been homeschooling or unschooling for a really long time. So it's not sort of a, I don't know what, 10 steps to a better homeschool. That's not how I feel. And I feel there are people who do that well. And I feel like there are personalities that who really respond to that very well. And there are periods in our life where we need that. But I just want to be clear that this is really a sharing. There's definitely some mentorship that happens both naturally among members, but also, you know, anything that we can offer from a mentorship perspective, we're happy to do that, but it's not set up as a coaching community. Do you have anything on that, Ashley?
No, that's perfect. Yeah, that's clear.
Okay, perfect. And it's a pretty generalized community, right? So there's lots of, we were just brainstorming, and it's very community oriented. So there were a few of us brainstorming, like, what did we want our new categories and our new hashtag spaces to be? They're very numerous. and
Yeah.
very broad. No, they're not even broad. They're actually so numerous because a lot of them are quite specific, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what I'm saying is the stuff that we can bring and that we can talk about can be quite broad. I think probably the biggest change, and maybe the something that's distinguishes it a little bit from some of the other communities that I'm aware of, is that we've decided to broaden. So as I mentioned, this community kind of evolved and grew over time from Sue Alvis's original Stories of an Unschooling Family. And Sue is still going to be contributing regularly, which I'm super excited about. So this is not, we're not like taking a hard, fast turn from the roots of the group. It's not that. It's more that we're adding in. So I think the base of our content and conversation is still going to be about conscious parenting and thoughtful parenting and lots of unschooling content, but we are broadening the base as far as whether people, like, you don't need to call yourself an unschooler, and not that the other community was ever hard, fast, or limiting with that. But I really feel like what we've done with the podcast is we often come with that energy or that spirit, but we're not just talking about unschooling all the time. And I hope, I mean, maybe we are more than I realize, but I hope that we're being open to different options and different choices in education. And so one of the things that we really, I mean, I in particular have noticed this a lot. Some of the people that don't necessarily call themselves unschoolers are some of the people that I have just really learned and valued from, not because of what they do or don't call themselves, but just because of the way they live with their families and the cool things that they get into and the stuff they're curious about. So we're really less concerned about what people call themselves. Like, we do have people in the current community who I think would identify more closely with like unit studies or relaxed eclectic homeschooling or whatever. And so we just want to allow space for that. That what we've noticed is that actually has worked really well. Like, you know, we're not really dancing over each other. We're just saying, I kind of consider myself an unschooler in this way, but in this way I don't. Or I don't really use that term, but I'm interested in bringing in what I can learn. Or I technically fit what many people think the definition of unschooling is, but I don't like the word. So I think it's just, or I've got some kids in school because that's what works for us.
Yeah.
So I want a space that I can still talk about some of the thoughtful parenting approaches. But it's not always about whether my kids are in school or not.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit tricky to explain, I think, isn't it? Because we're still coming from the same heart that we come from on this podcast. But I just feel like we're not just in the community, but even in the broader online world, we're just learning from people that we don't all need to use this. I think it's become a bit limiting for me, using the same term. So
yeah. We've talked about that. But I think that's helpful because it is hard to explain. And I think people are going to, if they're interested in the community, they're going to be asking themselves if it's the right community for them, you know, if they want to explore it, if they want to check it out. I mean, obviously people can check out a community and then decide within the community if it's the right fit or not and continue to stay or leave. That's always an option. But yeah, I think it's just helpful because it's not a community where it's like, you have to be an unschooler and all we do is talk about unschooling. You know, it's not at all like that. But of course, just, you know, we're unschoolers and there's an unschooling element, I guess. I won't try to add more because I think you actually did a really good job explaining that and trying to make it clear. But we just are, you know, if there's just someone who, whether they've listened to the podcast or not, they're interested. I mean, like, I hope that they just reach out and see. Not everybody's looking for an online community right now, but for those people who are, if they think that this might be something that could work for them or benefit for them, hopefully they don't. I think we just want to encourage them to ask more about it, right? And stay curious about it and not feel like, you know, see unschooling and go, well, we don't unschool, or I don't know if we unschool, and then don't look at it any further.
Or we unschool, but I don't necessarily want to just talk about only unschooling all the time. Because I think that's the other thing we've talked about is that sometimes, somebody will bring forward a game or a resource or something, and it really does not matter what situation you're in. You just want to talk, you want to dig into that and share ideas. You don't always, you know what I mean? Like people have a variation of things that they want to talk about. So it broadens the base a little bit. And this is it's not to put down anybody who is more niched down, so to speak, because there is such a space for that. That could actually be a need that somebody else has as well. Okay, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and maybe helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Hayley can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. Erin can be found at Everlearning. And I, Ashley, can be found on Instagram at AshleyAsMama and at Storytime Shelves. We'd be very grateful if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.